Olay. All right. All right. All right. All right. It is Wednesday, May 25th, 2022. The year is flying fast. Lots of stuff going on. And we have a great guest today. Before we get rolling, I'm going to ask our own John Sibley Butler to get some music.
In the November morning chill, when the village is quiet and still, I took a walk through the fallen leaves to the fisheries, where my old friend Pagliacci had coffee for me.
I like that one. I like that one. Very nice. Very nice. Johnny, how are you? What's going on? Lots of stuff going on, some concerns going on. Tell us
what's going on in the
great
state of Texas is that in the great state of Texas, we had another mass shooting at an elementary school in Uvalde, and the governor and all of the state officials are there now at a press conference that just ended. And I think what it does, it looks at, you could go comparatively now. We've had over 230 mass shootings in America, and everybody's asking, why is it happening? And of course, that has been the talk of all of the talk shows, the talk of everybody in the state of Texas, for someone to go in and to shoot somebody, that's kids who are unarmed. That's one thing that's going on. And then there was a great article in the Statesman yesterday about the grid, and I call it the politicalization of the grid, and the question that the governor has been given. The Statesman was saying that the grid is not prepared for the upcoming months in the heat, and the grid should have been redone months and months ago. So all of a sudden, as we know on this program, the grid has become a political issue for the first time, certainly in my lifetime. And the other thing that's happening, of course, is stock market. Stock market is going up and down. The war is ablaze in Europe. But the most important thing, of course, is the elections that's going on. And I just don't understand how the news media can measure it by whether or not the ex-president supports someone. Now, I think everybody should be on their own feet. So the greatest state of Texas is in mourning, and the United States of America is in mourning. And there's a war in Europe, and the virus might come back. So the only thing you can say is keep moving.
Yeah. It's anyway, interesting times. Our condolences to all the families and impacted by this tragedy. Llewellyn, how are you, sir?
I'm well, thank you, but these are rather grim times. I endorse, hard is it for me to bring myself to do that, everything that Johnny has said. I'm sure that some correction can be issued later. But basically, Johnny is quite right. What he left out of an otherwise good and total summation, but what was left out was the fact that we've got tremendous inflation, and we are going to have it for a long time. We are in one of those great periods of reset, and this is going to be a very difficult year. Food shortages globally coming out of the war in Ukraine, and a general tightening in food supply anyway, but now vastly exacerbated by the cutoff of grains from Russia, but especially from Ukraine itself, one of the bread baskets of the world. Africa will suffer terribly. They will have no money to buy grain if there is any to buy. So the situation is pretty precarious. We probably will plunge into some kind of depression, recession, but an interesting one, because normally a recession is accompanied by high unemployment, and we have essentially no unemployment. There are employers begging people to work at every level, from the very top to the very bottom. There is a shortage of labor, and we've not seen that concurrent with a recession in my experience. And that's very interesting. It may change the dynamics of the recession, but it does not seem with these shortages and with this degree of inflation that we can avoid a recession. But there are no fixes, no quick fixes. time is the only fix. As with all imbalances in markets, eventually demand will be suppressed and production will be increased, and you'll get equilibrium. But it's not something that's going to be achieved in the remainder of this year or next year.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's interesting times. We'll get into it in a moment. Let me say hello to our great guest, Greg, and look forward to spending some time with him today. Brian Keane is with us today. Brian, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Well, I was doing well until I heard all this bad news, but I'm doing great. Thanks. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Where are you today?
I'm in Arlington, Virginia, just outside of Washington, DC. And
brilliant.
the weather has been insane because it's 90 degrees last weekend and then it turns down to 60 degrees. But that's kind of the story of the United States and around the world because of climate change. So it's been crazy. Just to add the ongoing woes, I think.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let me introduce you to our audience. For those of them that don't know you, you are the president of SmartPower. Yep. And you're going to be with us. You're also, I understand, the co-founder and CEO of We Green.
Correct.
And you can share maybe about that as well today. And you are the author of Green is Good, and we'd like to hear what that book is about. I think it's obvious, but love to hear your synopsis on it. Prior to your current roles, you were the director of external affairs at the Conservation Law Foundation, and many other things perhaps that are not listed in your profile. And then you hold a Bachelor of Science in Journalism from American University, I believe.
Bachelor of Arts, just to put a finer point on it, but yes, from American University. That's right.
Yeah. So welcome to the program, and we focus a lot on digital transformation. You're going to bring a different angle to all this with what your company does, and we're interested in learning about it.
Sure.
But give us a sense real quick from, we track a lot of things related to smart energy and smart cities and smart buildings and all kinds of things that enable digital transformations. And we have had get phenomenal guests across the times. And give us a sense from your point of view and your ecosystem. It's COVID being a pandemic beyond the toll of taking 1 million Americans and others. It has been transformational in driving online transformation and digital things. What have you seen? What has it been super disruptive, destructive? What's your take on it? And then talk to us a little bit about what do you see for 2022 in your world?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think from where I sit, and I think kind of what a lot of Americans are seeing and people around the world are seeing, it is clearly disruptive and frustrating at a minimum. So if you just think about it, going back 2 years ago, when COVID first hit, how frightening and scary that was, right? What I call COVID classic, right? When it first hit, it was, oh my God, if you get COVID, you're going to die. And that's what certainly I had thought, is like, oh my God, if you get it, you're going to die. At best, the world is ending. And to where we are today, where it's just not going away. And that's kind of what we're dealing with now, which is this uncertainty. And that's, I think, really, what the economy hates and is uncertainty. What businesses hate is uncertainty. And that's really kind of going to be a sting for all of us for a long time now. And not to mitigate, by the way, the trauma and the drama of what we've all been through. But this uncertainty is really going to be a challenge, combined with supply chain issues and all that. What we're seeing, as it relates to clean energy and energy efficiency and the work that we do at SmartPower is is part of this challenge that, you know, we deal with a lot of residential folks who want to get solar power, for instance, a lot of people who want to do energy efficiency. We work on a community-based level, city to city, town to town. And these cities and towns are still overwhelmed. They're still kind of really, if you will, at best, distracted by what's going on in their hospitals, what's going on in their schools, to say nothing what's going on in the schools in Texas just yesterday. But if it's, you know, they're overwhelmed. And we come in saying, hey, we want to work with you on your sustainability issues, which is still a priority for them.
Right.
But it's now becoming, you know, the second, third, fourth, maybe 10th priority. But by contrast, and actually on a good note, we're seeing corporate America is actually saying, wait a minute, this is still increasingly a real priority. So we're hearing from corporate America saying, how can you help us with our sustainability priority? Sustainability priorities for corporate America, it's on a real big, it's a threefer for them. They need retention and they need to get employees. And this is a big one. And that's a huge deal for them. They need to actually meet what they're calling what our ESG goals, their environmental, sustainable, and governance goals. And they really do need to be a sustainability leader. Plus, by the way, they need to navigate this COVID issue, which is people are working at home, people are scared to come to the office, or people are just saying, I'm kind of done with this office thing, no matter what is happening with COVID. So if you want to, if I'm going to work here, I'm going to stay at home.
Yeah.
The opportunity, though, is then to say, hey, look, we can actually offer you a solar program. We can offer you solar at work and solar at home. We'll help you through your company learn how to get solar. Just the same way, by the way, companies offer healthcare programs. We're offering solar programs. And that's really pretty cool. And what I really do think this is and Llewellyn, I think you and I have talked about this before, but what really is kind of cool is seeing corporate America step up and seeing this as a bottom line opportunity for them, this being sustainability. 20 years ago, when I started SmartPower, I couldn't get a photo op with, you know, the local 5 and 10. They had nothing to do with us. And now you're getting Fortune 500 saying this is a huge priority. And that's really, really exciting. So,
right. So can you explain how does it work to work with you? How does that work?
Sure. So basically, you know, our programming is we work basically with cities and towns, or increasingly companies, where we offer in essence an educational program that ultimately leads people to a solar purchase. And it's called Solarize, and we call it, you know, Solarize at Work, for instance. And your company would engage with us, where we would then work through your company, through your communications channels at your company. So through your email, through your Slack, through your text messaging. And in essence, the CEO, the vice presidents, the sustainability director would basically be sending educational information to their employees saying, you know, hey, look, because you work at this company, we now have an opportunity to offer you solar for your homes. And because we're all working here, we can actually get a reduced solar price for solar. The company is not paying for the solar. In fact, just like the company doesn't pay for your healthcare necessarily.
Right.
The company, by the way, doesn't even have to pay for me and my nonprofit to come and run this program. So for the company itself, it's basically a free program. The employees love it because then they actually can finally figure out how to buy solar. Most Americans have a real hard time figuring out how to buy solar. So now they're appreciating that they work at this company that is helping them figure out how to buy solar. Since they're now working at home, they're using more energy at home. And they're like, isn't this great that my company has now helped me get solar in my home to help defray the cost of the extra energy I'm using. And my company is now a leader in sustainability. And I love working in this company because like 30% of the people that work here have solar. And so it really kind of starts feeding upon itself. And it's a really cool program.
Yeah.
The CEO of it. And then ultimately, you know, you can start having companies competing against companies, like-minded companies, that type of stuff. It's really exciting program. And it's really kind of taking off since COVID. So it is, you know, there are silver linings to COVID we keep talking about, you know, as tragic as the whole thing is, there are some silver linings, and this is kind of one of them. Really very interesting.
Go ahead, Johnny.
Yeah, Brian, it's John. You know, I do find you fascinating. I find the business model fascinating. I find the fact that a great technology has to be marketed to Americans fascinating. Remember in my Saturday morning group on the golf course, when somebody put up a solar system in the house, somebody would say, okay, let's aim to see if we can knock this solar panels out so we can go back to what's right for Texas. But let me ask you just this. Why do you think that such a marketing process is needed? Usually the American consumer is pretty wise about the needs that they need and what they can save. So I want to ask you about the numbers of switching to solar.
Yeah.
That is, we usually think about marketing as a relationship between what you need or what you think you need. I'm going to tell you what you need and what you have now and the numbers. So how do you sell? Let's forget about the companies themselves that you're partnering with or the cities. How would you send a salesperson to John Sibley Butler's house to market solar?
Yeah. Well, so
how does that go? Yeah.
Well, it's fascinating. So it's fascinating just marketing solar in general, keep in mind that as Americans, we buy anything really for two reasons, and two reasons alone. We buy things because we want them and because we need them. And we buy them actually in that order. So we will buy things that we want before we buy things that we need, which is its own problem, just for the record, right?
And because our friends have them.
All right. Well, and that is how we sell solar. So you're ahead of me. That is the magic of selling solar. It is peer-to-peer. It's peer pressure, quite frankly.
Right.
You, Johnny, you are 64% more likely to buy solar if your next door neighbor has solar.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the magic of what we do. And that's SmartPower's secret sauce, which
makes sense.
And that's really, and it's actually the magic of marketing today, which is it's really hard to break through in marketing today because we're bombarded constantly. So if you can break through on a peer-to-peer level, that's the best way to do it now. You know, you're more likely to watch a movie on Netflix because your friend said he saw that same movie on Netflix. You're more likely to go to a restaurant because someone you work with recommended that restaurant. You're more likely to get solar because somebody that you know, someone really in your social circle, not a friend, not a Facebook friend, but somebody in your social circle got solar. That's
well, let me follow it up. Is it going to vary by communities? Is it going to vary by how much, if I can get a map the network like we like to do when we market, just map the network. And I know that Brian is going to buy this car because his friends have this car also. Well, my question is, how does it vary by economic status? Do you target at certain economic agendas in terms of the price of housing that interacts with the friendship?
So we've done so much testing on that. Historically, solar has been, an expensive toy for rich people. And increasingly, it is not that. Increasingly, it's the cost has come way down. I mean, 20 years ago, solar would, if you would, for an average American house, if you can say that, it would be over $50,000. And you couldn't really find solar, but you couldn't loan any money to buy it. And it was prohibitive for quite frankly anybody. And you would never get a return on that money anyway. But today, the hardware costs have come way down, literally cut in half. And what we call the soft costs, the cost of actually getting on the roof and delivering that solar, have come way down as well. Though those are the costs that are kind of mixed really from community to community across the country. But with those costs, and now we have solar loans available whether it's a home equity loan or private companies that give solar loans or community banks and regular banks giving loans. You can actually get solar on your home really with no money down. That said, we then go into different communities, wealthy communities, low to moderate income communities, low income communities, and test out how it works. What we see is that actually, and it's really fascinating, but bear with me because it gets a little tricky, but regardless of income, people will buy solar on par with every other American. And then if you start testing out messaging on solar, so you say, hey, buy solar because it's good for the environment, or buy solar because it's good for your bottom, for your wallet, or buy solar because it's good for your community. Those messages have different impacts on different income groups. What's really fascinating is in low to moderate income communities, if you say buy solar because it's good for my community, people who hear the message buy solar because it's good for my community, in after action surveys, or after they get solar, they report being happier, quote unquote, and that's an official term. They're happier with their purchase. And as a result, they then become better solar ambassadors and then convince more people to buy solar. So low to moderate income communities wind up having more solar than wealthy communities.
Right.
So it's a lot of steps there, but it's really pretty fascinating that the messaging really drives more solar, even in low to moderate income communities, if the message is buy it because it's better for my community. And you can actually see why that would make sense, because it's not just I'm saving money for myself. It's not just for me, but it's like, hey, look, if we're all in this together and, we're living in this community, but by the way, we have the worst buses here and we have a lot of kids here with asthma. If we do this, we're all going to make this, it's not just for me, I'm getting better money, my house is better, but the community is going to be better too. It kind of makes.
Absolutely. And by the way, this is why people stopped smoking. It wasn't because of their health, because people turn their nose up at them, and their peers turn their nose up at them, and they stop smoking. Okay, I have dominated so far, Llewellyn. I'll give the space to my distinguished bow tie friend from wherever he's housed.
Well, I'm hugely impressed to see the quantum growth in your grace, acknowledging that.
Don't push it.
Brian Keane,
Yes.
solar is many things to many people. When I talk to utilities, which I do daily, their interest in solar is utility scale, a large installation which provides power directly to them, which they can either own or contract for. And a lot of them like it because it fits the shape of their load. And that is that they still have a decent amount of solar available from 5 to 7 at night, when most utility loads are at their greatest, which is everybody knows and why that is. When it comes to rooftop solar, there's a lot of dissension about it. Utilities have found it awkward, embarrassing, difficult to integrate, and a lot of trouble. Also, they run into over expectation from the rooftop owners, in that they thought that if they put this in, this would be of enormous demand to the utility. And so we got into what was that huge issue of net metering. And if they're selling back, which is what most homeowners, I understand, like to do, how much money they're going to get. And they have to understand something about the physics of electricity, the conversion from direct current to alternating current. They need to have a battery, a solar wall, that kind of thing. This is a fairly complex installation. It's not just the panels on the roof. There's a lot of background to it that goes as well. For it to work over a long period of time, it really needs to be welcomed, or at least tolerated in a congenial way by the utility. Otherwise, you lose half the effect. If you have no outlet for the surplus power and you have your own duck, as the utilities like to say, which is something, as you know, that happens out in the West, where there's an over generation during the day from solar and an under generation when they want it in the evenings. What is happening there? What is the relationship between the rooftop and the utility, and how is it evolving?
Well, I'd say it's an ever evolving process, and it's not one size fits all monolith across utilities. But generally, you're correct in your characterization. So I'll kind of summarize it like this too, which is, yes, the utilities.
Brian, Brian, could you say I was 100% correct? Otherwise, you give an opening for John Sibley Butler. I'm rather keen that wasn't happening.
Let me just correct myself. Llewellyn is 100% correct as always. And I would just make a caveat to myself, which is that but what's so fascinating is that the utilities when we started SmartPower, again, 20 years ago, we'd run around with rooftop solar and the utilities were like, oh, isn't that cute? That's cute, have fun, and it really, we were not even a gnat on the side of a dog, like there was nothing. But as it continues to go, you do have to be kind of, aware of the challenges the utilities have on this. And if you think about it, like realize the grid was designed to go one way, and that is from energy to our homes. And so as Llewellyn mentioned now, with rooftop solar, there is this net metering that's in place. And that says that if I have solar and I'm not using that energy, then the utility has to buy the solar back from me, that energy back from me, and many times at a premium price, by the way. And the grid isn't designed to go backwards. So they have to upscale the grid, and increasingly, by the way, more people are getting solar, and that's more work on the grid. So there's that. Meanwhile, they don't have the technology. We don't have the technology so that they can see every single house with solar on the grid. So they're not looking at every single house and saying, oh, well, Johnny has solar and Brian has solar, Llewellyn, like they don't see that. So it doesn't matter who, in their eyes, it doesn't matter who has solar, because they still have to call up the same amount of energy every day to make sure everybody is covered with energy, which is just, that happens to be their job, to make sure that they're supplying 24 hours of energy, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year at the cheapest price. And so we kind of have a duplication here of efforts. And then in the meantime, by the way, they have a lot of customers then saying, oh, and by the way, can you come and turn on my solar? Can you do this? Can you do that? And the other thing. And it's like, it's a lot of effort and a lot of work that all of a sudden is then thrown onto the utility. I was just talking to the utility about the same thing, just literally just before this call. So there's a lot of challenges. Where I think it's all coming to is a lot of different solutions that can be found so that this can all work together. By the way, utility scale solar is a huge get, like that's a big opportunity. Solar doesn't have to be one roof, another roof, and another roof. Utility scale solar is the same, is the perhaps even a better solution. Why not have large scale solar? Why not have large scale solar with large scale battery? We need, the one thing we know is we need more energy. One thing we know, we need more energy, and we need clean energy. So let's get it and let's make it. And if the utilities can do it, isn't that great? If the utilities can do community scale solar, community solar campaigns, that, by the way, could even engage some of their customers who want solar, that's a great thing too. They don't need to have it on their roof, but they can kind of have an ownership stake in it, and the utilities can actually see it. That's great too. So you kind of have to start seeing some kind of interesting interplay where the utilities are dealing with their customers. And also, it's what we're seeing, by the way, even since deregulation of the utility industry, and increasingly since folks have started getting the rapid rise of rooftop solar, is utilities are really engaging with their customers. And that's unique because utilities are a monopoly. Thomas Edison created the utility to be a monopoly, and it has been for 100 years. That's what he wanted, and that's what it is. And as such, they've never had to deal with their customers. But increasingly, that is what is happening. And it's going to happen. It'll happen now with electric vehicles and electric charging stations. They're going to have to help their customers with their electric charging stations in their driveways. So things are happening. And I think it's just kind of, it's probably all for the good, but it's not, but it is painful kind of for everybody. But it's part of the process.
So Brian,
hold on, let me chime in real quick. So we do have competition in about 20 states. And solar plays a significant role in how utilities are needing to reimagine their planning and collaborating with what's called prosumers, which are these, solar EV energy storage type of customers. But Brian, real quick, on your how do you quantify success? You've been around for a while. How many program users, or how do you track success? How many Americans are using your programs, or how many utilities, or how do you share that number? What is that number?
So, and we, in a couple of ways. So it depends. It's quite frankly, we are a nonprofit marketing firm, but our metrics for success vary by client to client. And what our ultimate goal for SmartPower is actually to create a marketplace for clean, renewable technologies. Solar happens to be one of them. And we kind of see it as a gateway for a bunch of them. So it could be electric vehicles, it could be, anything. It's a wind, it could be anything. But so really what we're trying to do is to get these technologies into the hands of consumers so that then the price can come down and more consumers are using them, and these become part of the sustainability solution is really what we're looking for. As we look at the work we've done on solar, what we would say is, well, we have actually dropped the price of the customer acquisition cost of residential solar per watt, which is how one measures customer acquisition for solar, from 30 cents per watt to 11 cents per watt. And that's a game changer. So now we're a not-for-profit, we're not a for-profit business as SmartPower. If somebody takes our model, they should be meeting an 11 cent per watt acquisition, customer acquisition, and they should be making a fortune. Which, by the way,
but again, how many Americans are benefiting from this?
So, and then to answer that question, we do in a 3-year period, we can do $100 million of installed residential solar, which would be a couple, 4,000 or 5,000 homes in a 3-year period. So we're in any solar campaign, any solar program, you're actually still scratching the surface. We're not selling Coca-Cola here. We're selling solar.
Okay.
But and I would also just say, by the way, what's really fascinating with anything that you're talking about, clean energy or renewable energy, even energy efficiency, all of this is we're creating best practices so that ultimately we can see if this can actually get into a marketplace and really take off. That's what we're trying to do.
Brian, what is the life cycle of a solar panel? Is it 25, 30 years? You've got 20 years experience, some of your original. And what is the recycling potential for these panels? There are an awful lot of them, and they've got some nasty stuff in them if they're not recycled correctly.
That's correct. I might be the half-life of a solar panel at this point. So the warranty on them is 25 years, I think is what they say. And then basically what you're looking at is a lot of steel under panel, the steel girds under it, but the silicon is what they're made out of by and large. So that's, I'm assuming, the nasty stuff you're talking about. What we're really trying to combat, though, is climate change. And so what you have for that 20 years or 25 years is actually carbon-free energy being created.
But you also need a battery to go with it. So that's another recyclable or not dimension to this thing.
Yeah, though, if you saw the news today, Elon Musk says he has a 100-year battery that he's now created. So, there's what's fascinating, is just how fast this technology is moving.
Yeah, but we could have 100 years nuclear plant, but we tend not to. We get them up to about 80 years now, which is quite phenomenal compared with any other power system. But they're basically replenished along the way. They're not. But the life cycle and the intensity, the problem would seem to me to be Steel is recyclable. We know that it's highly recyclable, but you have a hugely diverse source of it. You know, if you pull down a single windmill, you've got quite a lot of steel in one place, but you'd have to strip 20 or 30 roofs to get as much steel in one place, which changes the dynamic. I'm not saying it shouldn't be done. I just say the dynamic is different. And it does tend to favor utility scale solar. But an issue that arises there, and I'd like your view on this, is utility scale solar is beginning to be criticized for its use, its land use dimension. It's not going on roofs, industrial roofs, as fast as we had anticipated.
Yeah. You mean because of the land use?
Well, land is cheap initially, and later it's expensive.
Yeah, though I've always kind of been anxious about the land use of utility scale, but I think interestingly, I just saw something last week, maybe it was 2 weeks ago, but of the clear solar panels, if you've seen them, where if you're doing industrial scale solar, they're clear panels, and then you can literally grow things underneath them, which would be pretty cool. So that technology is already out there. So now you can do two things at once on that same piece of
I
land.
think there are a lot of places you can put solar panels if you have the will and if the economics are right. For example, over railroad lines or railroad real estate, of which there's a great deal scattered around. What is the competition at the utility scale between solar and wind? Is there a competition there? One is intermittent, one you know the time of day where you're going to get the most benefit. How do those work together, and what is favored?
Well, I don't actually, that is really geographic. So it depends on really kind of where the utilities are located and where then they get the best sun and the best wind. I mean, go back to Texas and you have basically the best of everything. You know, Governor Abbott is the one who says, you know, we're not an oil state, we're an energy state. And we have everything. You want wind, we got wind. You want sun, we got sun. You want oil, we got oil. We got gas. You name it, we got it. Not every state has that. So they basically go with what they got. But that's, you know, I mean, Arizona is not basically a wind leader, but they are a sun leader. And actually, that's what we were just talking about. Like, if you know, the Arizona utilities, they should be leading in solar, simply because they work in a desert. You know, like, I mean, like, they should at least own what you got. Like, you know, they can have other generation too, but they should actually be able to at least say, look, good. And they already, by the way, they do have a good solar portfolio. So at least own that, like get the credit for it, that type of thing. It's really fascinating.
Yeah, Brian, we also have Andre Carvalho, the governor forgot to put his name in wind and solar. Let me ask you this. You know, I have seen lots and lots of great technologies creating electricity. And let me give you a scenario. If Microsoft had not changed since they started, I could not download anything on Microsoft. I would say, Brian, that your biggest problem is that the grid as we have it now, it does not have the technology to accept the new kinds of production of energy because you can't download it. And you can't download it because, quote, there's no software. You know, if there is software, the software is ancient. So how do you say this? Like, if we had the technology, if the grid was like Microsoft, right?
Right.
Then you don't have to burn up California when you try to download the solar energy to the utilities. So where are we, in your estimation, in getting the grid so that it could have the kind of software where you can download stuff and the city doesn't burn up, or county doesn't burn up, or a fire doesn't start?
You'll see, right. So in some utilities and some individuals are already thinking this, and and you can take it all the way to a virtual power plant, where basically, if you're thinking, Southern Cal Edison's already doing this, that if you took a community that has, and this is where rooftop solar really is important. If you took a community that has rooftop solar on, for argument's sake, 300 homes, and if those 300 homes have battery storage as well, and those 300 homes have transponders on each of those homes, then all you have to do is have an online platform that perhaps connected by blockchain, by the way, organized by blockchain, can then communicate to say, hey, look, I need some more energy today, and Llewellyn's not home. So we're just switching energy back and forth between these 300 homes in this community. And that's already piloting. That's already happening. Utilities are testing this. In addition to, by the way, separate companies testing this independently of utilities. It's already out there. And that's kind of that, and that actually goes to exactly your point, which is the grid is 100 years old. Like, this is not a smart grid. We talk about smart grid, but we're not smart there. I mean, it's not smart yet. It's not a dumb grid, but it's not smart. But if we can create a virtual power plant, so we can create these power plants where we are then, simply subscribing to a platform where, for $5 a month, I'm using your energy, you're using mine. How cool is that? Or my car is simply plugged in and that's the battery. We're talking about solar batteries on houses. I talked to a guy 2 weeks ago and he's like, no, I'm not going to get one because I got the truck already. And it's like, that's unbelievable. Like, okay. Like, he said he's 2 years ahead. So,
and this is what we did with rural electricity in the South. Electrification, when everything was independent and people shared. Well, thank you very much. I just think that as new technologies develop, and I think Andreas can speak to this, as the grid really moves ahead in its smartness, then it's much better for business models like yours.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Well, and I think just in climate, when we talk about climate and we talk about sustainability and we talk about the fear of climate, the bright spot I see is technology. It's not the only answer, but it is a huge bright spot. I get scared when we see like, oh, the solution is going to be one massive government bill that's going to fix all of climate change. And it's like, that just makes my heart sink because it's never happened yet. And if that's what we're going to pin our hopes on, forget about it. But every time kind of all these cool technologies come up, like, that's a cool piece and that there's something there. We should be kind of at least look a little hopeful.
Ron,
Yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna add real quick that the grid is at different levels of evolution, in terms of sophistication, and there's more and more automation coming. The real challenge is not the technology or the utilities wanting or not wanting to do it. The challenge is the regulatory environment. Utilities are in a pickle in many ways because they're vertically integrated and they have generation. They need to figure out how they continue to pay for the investments that they have made on bulk power. In deregulated competitive states like Texas, we do have new rules that allow for energy storage and distributed energy resources to be added to the grid in a more aggressive way versus other states. So it's really the policy that is lagging in terms of all the desire to have prosumers and peer-to-peer energy transactions and all that. And hopefully the regulators will continue to evolve and find models and ways that work for keeping whole the investments that have been made on bulk generation at the utility scale, which over time should be replaced by distributed energy at the local level, hopefully.
Well, Andre, let me ask you about this. Now, I see that Brian, you were president of Val. I was too. I was on the committee to elect a president for for President George W. Bush, and I see that you've had some experience as an advisor too. Brian, I don't ever remember the grid coming up at all in any, whether we were in Houston or in Dallas. So, Andre, what we've got to do is, I'm gonna ask Brian, how do we get and make what happened, what Andre has said, how do we make it happen? Because in all of my experiences, in all of your experience, do you ever remember sitting around in Washington talking about the grid?
No, though, that's a great point. And, but though, last night, as those election returns were coming in, I did hear somebody say that the grid is on the ballot. And I was like, that's unbelievable. They were talking about that.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, I was like,
Andreas on
that's
the
unbelievable.
Yeah.
You know,
Brian, earlier in the broadcast, you mentioned ESG.
yes.
How do you see that? I wonder whether it's an asset or whether it has a pernicious underside, that it is going to become a new religion, a new ism. When they said that Elon Musk wouldn't qualify to be listed as an ESG, that's ludicrous. He's done more for the environment with electric vehicles than anyone else, and ESG is missing the boat if it's missing Elon Musk and what he has done. So I wonder about it, whether it isn't just a new elitism with a lot of power that people have allotted to it without recognizing they've made the allotment.
Well, this is the angst of the whole thing, and specifically Elon Musk. No, but this is the angst, which is all of these corporations have gotten the religion, and they said, okay, we're in, like we'll play along.
Have they gotten the religion, or have they been coerced into the religion because the financial houses got religion early, and you generally do what your banker wants you to do?
Well, money talks, right? So but here's the angst of the whole thing, which is money talks. So they say, okay, and basically the companies are saying, tell us what we need to do. What do you want to know? You want to, but today, and just today, there are 16 reporting agencies that they have to report their ESG to. 16, right? Tomorrow that could be 19 or 20, 28, or who knows. And they're all asking different things. What we as environmentalists need to do, and what the ESG community needs to do, is to say, look, you have to report on these 10 things or 20 things or 150 things, whatever it is. You got to say what they have to report on, how many you have to report on, and to how many reporting agencies. But if it just keeps going as, 16 agencies, 100 agencies, these companies are just saying, tell us specifically what we have to do and we will do it. And that's what's happening. So that's kind of
so it's become a kind of good housekeeping seal. But who determines? We know who set up the good housekeeping seal. The Hearst company did, with a commercial interest to sell product, in their case, advertisements in their magazines. Who is benefiting from ESG? Who is setting the standards, and who is guarding the gods? These, I think, are very relevant questions which are not being asked sufficiently and with not sufficient determination.
Well, because there are no specific rules. The danger, though, Llewellyn, is the ESG was set up so that the federal government wouldn't do it. Without kind of, this is the businesses policing themselves. If this can't be resolved, we're going to wind up with the federal government then saying, here's what it's going to look like.
But self-regulation, which is what ESG is across a broad spectrum, can be very destructive. We've seen it in the newspaper industry. We saw it in the movie industry. When people start establishing for their own purposes standards that they succeed in making a national standard or forcing others to abide by, you haven't done anything very good at all. I feel that we are set loose a sort of monster here that everybody is going to have to appease and nobody likes.
So let me chime in real quick on that. So there is an ESG reporting 101 companies that kind of, there are standards, there are booklets, there are kind of key performance indicators. They exist. I would say that the challenge is that ESG is very broad. It covers too many things. So for example, buildings, cities, the auto industry, transportation, the whole industrial complex, productions, plants, treatment plant. And so ESG touches a lot of things. And I think it's a new way of living, if you will, right? And it's a journey more than a destination. You're never there, right? And so I think that's part of the challenge. So it's sort of like, what the ESG policies in Nebraska and what success looks in Nebraska is not what it looks like in California or New York or what have you. And I think that's part of the challenge. The challenge is there is no one thing that fits everybody and
And
solves.
supposing you fall afoul of an ESG rating, there is
Right.
no appellate procedure. There is no way to vindicate yourself.
Right.
I think that's a grave and serious impediment to the effectiveness of ESG. Eventually, I assume that people will get sick of the whole thing and abandon it because there is no point of contact. You can't go to a central organization and say, I have been mishandled, I have been lied to, I have been libeled, I've been defamed.
Right.
You can't do that.
Right.
So it's going to be, the rich will be able to hire people to make a lot of fuss and get a new assessment, and the lesser companies will suffer terribly. I
Yes.
fear.
Yeah, it's possible.
Well, I'm trying to put my head around what you just said about the rich always make the country go, doesn't it? I can't get my head around.
Well, sir, because of your
I'm
own
trying to get my head around it. I don't
because
understand.
of your
Hold on,
wealth,
hold it.
which
My
you-
pilot is
which you-
calling. My pilot is calling. Oh, yeah, just one
because
minute.
of your because of your wealth, which you have used effectively to humiliate me on this program in the past.
I'm just wondering, I'm just wondering.
Brian, John Sidley Butler, I said, well, how can you be right? He said, because I sold my company for $50 million. And I didn't have anything to say for 5 minutes.
You guys are too funny.
Very impressive.
Oh, we're having
So,
fun.
so again, for the audience, look at Workiva ESG Reporting 101 ebook, WORKIV as in Victor A, ESG Reporting 101. And basically, real quick, there is an environmental, there is a social, and there's a governance, 3 tracks to keep track of on how you do this reporting and what are you tracking and how you do it. And it's fairly elaborate. There's also kind of companies that are driving it, like Microsoft and 3M and Coca-Cola and American Express and many others. But the challenge that we just discussed is that there is no maturity model in a way for me to compare how well I'm doing versus somebody else.
Yeah.
Yet.
I think it's a free-floating ethic that will be imposed on people against their will.
Yeah, and we have a comment from one of our listeners that Dixon Wright that says, are there any defined data standards and for reporting? And the answer is sort of, kind of. And then he chimes in and says that maybe XBRL could be used as a standard definition, collective standard methodology to share the data into some organized database that some organization will keep up with. United Nations, the Organization of American States, who knows?
What it needs, right? So a couple of years ago, I started the ESG Association.
Mhm.
But I think you're right. It would have to be like a UN or something like that, because an association would simply be a membership association.
Yeah.
That would be paid for by.
So Brian, let's fantasize for a moment. Electric vehicles are happening. We're coming to the hour here. We could talk for an hour about you. What's keeping you from accelerating? You're bringing goodness to a lot of people. You're helping people see the light. If you were God for a moment, or you had a pixie dust bag, or you had a little, wang of sorts, what's missing? What do you need?
Yeah, well, it's pretty simple. So, quite frankly, if we were able to go to, if we simply just went to if we just went to 100 of the Fortune 100 and ran our Solarize at Work campaigns, that would be the spark underneath this whole thing. And I'll tell you what we would do. We wouldn't just do solar. You could do solar. So basically, the model is basically you go and do solar, and that solar campaign is a 20-week kind of campaign. Think of it, and we do it every year for 3 years. So you do that 20-week campaign in a company, each year for 3 years. So you're kind of getting, people who don't buy the first year, or new people that come in, that type of thing, kind of like insurance, and health insurance. But then you could also sell them heat pumps. Okay, so you understand that with air conditioning, central air conditioning in the United States, we all love our central air conditioning. We don't need it, and it is a huge waste.
What do you mean we don't need it?
Because heat pumps today are really the answer. Heat pump today is the energy saver that our homes and businesses really need. Because with heat pumps, we actually can then, instead of actually taking the air and then putting it through chillers, using the energy to chill that air and then bring it back into the home, a heat pump actually just takes that air and brings it back, takes it from the outside and brings it into our home, so that we actually just have the same cool air outside now into our home, or the other way around. And that's really what we want. It is a more expensive system to install, but once it's there, it actually saves us money over the next 20 years. And so if we start installing heat pumps into homes, and new homes, by the way, are increasingly doing this, we actually start saving huge amounts of carbon, huge amounts of energy, and it becomes a game changer in the United States. And that's so in kind of that becomes a real play for us. We talk about HVAC, but that's the play that we start doing. So when I talk about, a solar installer working with this homeowner for their lifetime, like that's what I think is so cool. That we've always thought about buying solar as just a one-off, but it's like it shouldn't be. It actually should be that solar installer is working with that family for the next 50 years. They're owning that. Your insurance guy used to be with you for your entire life. Your banker was with you for your entire life. The solar guy should be with you for your entire life, because they're going to help you make your home sustainable and your lifestyle sustainable. And this is part of it. And so what we could do with this Solarize at Work campaign is make every employee in your company living a sustainable lifestyle for their entire lives through all these different technologies. And in your company, you could help bring these technologies to your employees. I just think it'd be a cool piece.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that the point that you make is a good one in terms of, the whole cooling paradigm is shifting with heat pumps. And, if you go to Carrier, I don't know if everybody knows, but my favorite scientist of all time is Willis Carrier, who invented the heat pump in Buffalo, New York in 1905. And without him, there would be no Texas population. So the air conditioner sort of has evolved, and you can do air conditioning or a heat pump system to achieve the same outcome. And so all these companies sell both.
Andres, you make a great point.
Yep.
The speed with which air conditioning was deployed is an example of what could happen with decentralized energy systems. And it has changed the world. It's also brought, for example, sped up the women's movement, because women were free from the drudgery they had been assigned since time immemorial to get out of the house. So you've got two things going there. People with appliances, but most especially heat pumps, making whole tranches of the world livable when they weren't heretofore, which includes Texas, or most of Texas, maybe not the hill country, and certainly all of Florida in the summer.
Absolutely. Right. Johnny, you had a question.
I found the heat pump very, very interesting. We like to say, how did the University of Texas become a great school? The Board of Regents invented air conditioning and air conditioned all the buildings. My question is how would you employ? I don't think most people are aware of the heat pump and the history of the air conditioning. Yeah, I'm a Southern Louisiana boy, and we used to have a lot of ice in a big number 5 wash tub and put a fan, and the fan would cool the ice, and the ice would cool the room. So what would it be to replace air conditioning? You think that could be done?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It definitely can be done. And actually, the approach to this campaign is exactly the same campaign as it is with solar. It's exactly the same campaign as it is with solar storage. It's exactly the same campaign as it is with electric charging stations. It starts with an education campaign. People, and this is true just with Americans, consumers in general. And I don't mean this as a knock, but we don't know energy. We don't interact with energy. The only time the American consumer engages on energy is at the gas pump. And that is why it's such a barometer for everything. Like, and just think of it, we don't buy energy except we buy gas. And so, when you walk into your office building, it has energy. You walk into a home, it has energy. So asking people to buy a new type of energy is bizarre. Like, it's just duplicative. Like, so we have to educate them first. It has to be like, oh, did you know there's a better, smarter, easier way to do this? And Americans are like, well, if there's a better, easier, smarter way, I'm in. Just tell me how to do it. Can I go to Walmart and get it? I'm in. And it's like, well, no, it's not as easy as Walmart, but here's how I can do this. And that's kind of where we walk them down that path. And so it really is. And if you can, and, by the way, we always say, like, there's no solar store, there's not a heat pump store, but we can bring it to your house. We can bring it to your community. We can bring the heat pump store to your business. And that's really what we have to do. Because it's when it's that easy, people will do it. They're that smart.
Yeah. So again, all the companies that are in the cooling, heating world have all these technologies, and it's a function of, that you have centralized, distributed heat pumps, air conditioning, chillers, all of the above, right? So you got to do your homework based on your premise. But they all do it. They all sell them. I just published, put on the catalog here, the Carrier explanation between heat pump and air conditioning and all that. And so, again, it's all about energy efficiency, longevity, cost, and convenience. And so some people, don't want to sacrifice, and they want to have their house at 60 degrees. And then there's me who wants to have the house at 80 degrees. So, and all that drives what system is best for your house. So we got to wrap up here, Brian. We appreciate you very much. It's been great to have you. We have learned quite a bit. Please come back. We will reach out about our annual conference and other things that we would like to get you involved. And all the best to you.
Thank you. I really enjoyed this. Thank you so much for having me. You guys are great.
Absolutely. Llewellyn and Johnny, any final
Just
comments?
thank you for Brian. It's always exciting to be on a program with you, Brian. You have interesting things to say. And I apologize for my colleague, who I shall not name again, because he gets too excited if he hears his name broadcast a lot. But we thank you for coming. And he is going to play us some music to get us out of this.
Well, Brian, thank you very much for putting up with us. We're gonna. The sun came up and it was blue and gold. The sun came up and it was blue and gold. Sun came up and it was blue and gold. Ever since I put my cellar in a frame. And I'm gonna love you till the cows come home. Ever since I put my in a song. That's for you, Brian.
Thank you.
That was awesome. That was awesome.
Okay.
Thank
All right,
And,
you
and
guys.
thanks everybody for tuning in. And
All right, Llewellyn, I love you. Take care.
Love you too, mate.
All right.
Cheers.
Thank you.
bye guys.
Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.